Please welcome to the stage, Jamie Brickhouse!
Tweens are garbage, and I'm no different. Or rather, I was no different. I met my first boyfriend in first grade. I was a precocious child. His name was Eric Munson, and we met during PE class, the way most budding homosexuals meet, far on the sidelines of the playing ground. And it was the 1970s, and we were both in Mrs. Chambers' class in little old, flat as a flitter, hot and steamy, oil refinery oasis, cancer capital, Beaumont, Texas. Now, while the other boys played a savage game of dodgeball, you know, that barbaric game where they pummel each other with those big red rubber balls. I mean, guys are cruel enough as it is. Why encourage them? But Eric and I sat atop the monkey bars, and we discussed our very favorite episodes of Bewitched. Now, for those of you not in the know, Bewitched was that 1960s sitcom about a beautiful blonde witch named Samantha, married to a mortal Darren, and her meddlesome drag queen of a mother, Endora. Endora. With her flaming red hair teased up into giant sausage curls and her long, flowy sky blue chiffon gowns that matched her sky blue eyeshadow, she was eye candy to a couple of boys like Eric and me. And Eric was eye candy to me. I mean, when we met on the playground, he said to me, "I sure do like your pretty red hair." And I said, "I like your pretty blue eyes." His eyes were the color of the aquamarine ring that Mrs. Chambers wore. And he had blonde hair, and it was so light, it was almost white. And they called boys with hair that color towheads, which I thought was an ugly name for something so beautiful. And he even had little wisp of it on his forearms like a man. Now, I didn't know the term turned on in those days, but I think I was turned on by those little wisps of hair. So pretty soon, Eric and I were playing Bewitched on a regular basis. But in our version, Darren didn't exist. Samantha and Endora galloped across Europe using their powers freely. Now, I played Samantha. Eric was so homosexually advanced, he played Endora. He could perfectly mimic her drag queen gestures as he'd cast spells with a tornado of whirling arms and sucked-in cheeks and arched eyebrows. Vroom! Eric could always outdo me on the Sissy Fabulous scale. Now, Mrs. Chambers was as equally enamored of me and my pretty red hair as Eric was, and my feelings for her were mutual. I mean, she had a big personality and a bubble of brunette hair and bright makeup that was punctuated by frosted pink lips. 3 times a day, she would pull an amethyst glass atomizer from her desk drawer and spray herself with what I imagine was Chanel No. 5. She was like a movie star to me. And she loved teaching, and she loved me. "Jamie, you're my star pupil. I see a big future for you." And she loved fostering creativity in the classroom, especially in the afternoons during coloring and writing time. And it was during those times that Eric would write his love poems for me on manila paper with Crayolas. "Roses are red, violets are blue. Your red hair is pretty, and so are you." I know, very sweet. And I was really proud of that. And I showed it to Mrs. Chambers. I mean, in my innocence, I didn't think there was anything to be ashamed of. I just thought it, was what it was, which was one person displaying their affection for another. And when I showed it to her, she didn't gush and say, "Oh, Jamie, isn't that wonderful?" like she did about all the creations I showed her. Instead, she just kind of cocked her head to the side and said, "Well, now, isn't that something?" Now, Eric and I played after school together at each other's houses and on the weekends, but in the evenings, almost every evening, we had long phone conversations. And we took cues from how our mothers spoke on the phone. So I would cradle the receiver between my ear and my shoulder and mock file my nails. Or I'd lethargically twirl the long, squiggly cord like a jump rope. And we'd have conversations like this. Eric would say, "Now, honey, I'm not going to be at Bridge Circle tomorrow. I'm getting my hair done. So don't you let those girls talk ugly about me while I'm not there." "Oh, honey," I would say, "I've got your back." And I would end all of the conversations the exact same way. "Well, let me let you go." Which is how my mother ended her phone conversations, when it was really she who wanted to be let go. It's the Southern way of dropping someone. So after first grade, Eric and I we no longer had the same teachers into second and third grade, but we remained best friends, best girlfriends. And I also remained really close with Mrs. Chambers, kind of besties with her too. And we had the same birthday, and I even got to spend it with her and her family in her mansion that she lived out in the country with. And I started hanging out after school, if I wasn't playing with Eric, in her classroom as her special little helper. I loved those afternoons because she would take me into her confidence and give me the lowdown and the gossip of what was going on with her current crop of students. "Travis Boudreaux can't seem to concentrate. He's what they call hyperactive. But now Kathleen Winslow is one of my star pupils. Very creative, just like you were." I loved it. I loved being talked to like an adult. I told you I was a precocious child, and even my kindergarten teacher had noted it in my report card. She said, "Jamie seems to favor the company of adults over children his own size, so his own age." And I was like, well, duh. I mean, adults know things. So on one of those after-school afternoons, Mrs. Chambers calls me over to her desk. "Jamie, I want to have a little talk with you." I loved little talks with big people. I ran over to her desk, and I looked up at her. "Jamie, do you know the word sissy?" I looked at her, and her head was cocked like that time I showed her one of Eric's love poems. "Jamie, do you know what a sissy is?" And my eyes focused in on her frosted pink lips as she said, "Sissy." I think so. I don't know if I knew or if I intuitively knew, but I felt like I was in trouble. Well, Eric might be one, and the other boys might think you're one too if you hang around him too much. Maybe you should take a little break from him for a while. Then she winked and ruffled my red hair. Just something to think about. I don't know how much I thought about it, but after that conversation, every time Eric came over to play, I kept making up lame excuses why I couldn't. And I suppose at that time, I thought that sissy meant being too girly, and I hadn't been called a sissy, but I had a problem with my name because the boys were constantly making fun of me, saying, "Why do you have a girl's name? Jamie's a girl's name." And then worse, they started calling me Jamie Summers, which was the name of the Bionic Woman, which was a hit TV show at that time. And I was not Jamie Summers. By that point, I was Jill from Charlie's Angels, the Farrah Fawcett role. But that was my little secret. And after that conversation with Mrs. Chambers, I thought, maybe if I hang around him, it may not be my little secret anymore. And I thought I had to choose between her and him. And I thought I needed the validation and adult friendship that I had with her. And I remember the last time I saw Eric. He was standing on my front porch, and I had given him yet another lame excuse for why I couldn't play. I think I said something like I was going to be playing with the boys down the street, Gunsmoke, this Western TV show, and we both knew that was a fairy tale. This time, he didn't protest. He just said, okay. And his aqua blue eyes were moist. To break the awkward moment, I said the only thing I could think of to say. Well, let me let you go. He got on his bike and he pedaled away. Not long after that, my family moved across town to a new house, and so I changed school districts. So I didn't see Eric anymore, or Mrs. Chambers. By the time I hit junior high, I had been called sissy many times, and a lot worse. And Eric was nowhere near me when it happened. But one summer in junior high, I had an epiphany. Mrs. Chambers was right. Eric is a sissy. And you know what? So am I. And I got on my bike and I rode across town to his house, determined to resume our game of Bewitched, but maybe I'd be Darren to his Samantha. I rang the doorbell. A strange man answered. His father? Is Eric home? Who? Eric Munson? Oh, the Munsons. No, they moved to Oklahoma years ago. I was too late. So I grew up, and I shook the dust from my shoes from that oil refinery town in Texas, and I came to New York City to lead my own sissy fabulous life. Thank you very much. Which for me meant a lot of alcohol and drugs. And it was pretty fun for a long time. And, you know, I'd close down the bars in Chelsea and then go to the after-hours clubs and do cocaine. And then I'd wake up in the morning with strangers whose names I didn't know. And then I started waking up in towns whose names I didn't know, like Patterson, New Jersey. But after a while, the fabulousness sunk to an alcoholic depression. And I bottomed out on a suicide attempt, an overdose of pills. And after I got sober, I started wondering about Eric a lot. I mean, I'd never forgotten him. I don't know that he was the love of my life, the man that got away, probably more like the best girlfriend who got away. And about 4 years ago, I tried to find him on Facebook, and I found an Eric Munson that seemed like it was a match, and I sent him a message. And I knew that when he got it, he was going to respond immediately and say, "Is this Jamie? Jamie Brickhouse from Mrs. Chambers' class? Call me." And I'd call him, and we'd have one of those long phone conversations like we used to have when we were kids. And I'd say, "Eric, how are you? Where are you? What have you been up to?" And he'd say, "Girl, I'm fabulous. I'm living in Philadelphia, and I'm a drag queen, and no one can do shares. If I could turn back time better than I can." And I would say, "I knew that you found a way to channel your talent for mimicking Endora into a fabulous drag queen career." And then I would say, "Eric, I'm sorry for letting Mrs. Chambers nip our friendship just as it was flowering." And he'd say, "Oh, honey, don't worry about it. We were just kids, and she was just a small town cunt." But the conversation never happened. I never got a response. And then I recently connected with another classmate from Mrs. Chambers' class who had kept in touch with Eric. And for a minute there, I didn't know who I was talking to because he was a she in first grade. So there must have been something in the waters in that class, or maybe Mrs. Chambers was fostering a creativity she never imagined. So I asked him, you know, "What about Eric? Where's Eric? How is he?" And he said, "Well, he never made it far from small towns in Oklahoma and Texas, and he had some serious problems with alcohol and drugs." I said, "Just like me." I said, "I don't know why, but I kind of felt like that might be the case. Wait, had? Where is he now? And my friend said, well, Eric killed himself about 4 years ago. He ended up in a small redneck town 30 minutes from Beaumont. Once again, I was too late. And I couldn't help but wondering, would it have turned out any differently if I had remained his friend back in elementary school? If I had gotten to his house sooner before he moved away to Oklahoma? If I had reached out to him on Facebook maybe a year earlier? I'll never know. And I'll never get to tell him that I'm sorry for the last words I said to him so many years ago. Well, let me let you go. Thank you.
Take off!